What's up, guys? Jaxel here. I wanted to release a update video to the USB to Dreamcast adapters I sell on my Etsy shop. There are a couple of changes I want to get into. The biggest one, this new model of the USB to Dreamcast Plus. I'm going to get into this in a moment, but for now, let's talk about the smaller version, which is the USB to Dreamcast, the simple model that I sell for $40. There is a new option available right here called Type. I'm sorry, nope. This is an old option. You can of course choose USB A, USB C, as well as plug. The new option is for firmware, and for firmware you can use USB 4Maple, Joypad OS, or Pico2Maple. USB 4Maple is the oldest of all the firmwares. It is the most mature. It has the highest compatibility of controllers. I have not run into a single controller that does not work on it yet. But who knows, there may be something that doesn't work on it that works on a different firmware. For instance, Joypad OS. Joypad OS is the firmware I personally use. I like it the most. I can talk to Robert very easily on his Discord. He's the guy who wrote this firmware, Robert Dale Smith. And he's working on a lot of cool things with it. He has a web GUI so that you can actually put in custom controls and change them at will using the web UI. It's very easy to use. I like it the most. The important thing to note between the USB 4Maple and the Joypad OS is both of them use the same exact wiring. They're both open source. And if you like one or the other, you can actually swap back and forth between the two simply by updating the firmware, by plugging the device into a USB 2.0 port on your computer, and dropping in the firmware. So if something works on one OS or one firmware and not the other, you can find out what works best for you. There's also now a new third option called Pico2Maple. Pico2Maple is not open source, and it uses a completely different wiring than the other two. So if you use the Pico2Maple, you are stuck using the Pico2Maple. But there is an advantage of using the Pico2Maple in that it uses the onboard memory to act as an internal VMU. So if you're using the Pico2Maple, it also includes built-in VMU slots, so you can save to your adapter if that's something you need. But like I said, it's closed source. No one really knows what's going on. But I haven't run into many controllers that don't work on it yet, but there are a few. So that's a choice that you have to consider if you're making that choice. But let's move on to talking about the USB to DC Plus, which you can see here. I have a new model running on it, and this is running with the Pico2Maple that I mentioned before. If we compare it to the old model, which let's bring up the picture right here. The old model, we can see that the screen is wider compared to it. So we've got the wide screens on the left and right versus having the 4 lines. And that is because there's more information being shown on the screen. We have the VMU slot as well as any other information. One of the things that people had problems with the old model, the USB 4Maple model, is what is a bit more confusing to use. It's really designed for high-end users that really understand electronics. So people were very confused when they would plug it in. They would plug it in and nothing would show on the screen. And that is because the VMU is downstream from the memory unit, the MU. So without a memory unit, there is no visual memory unit. As I mentioned before, the Pico2Maple falls back to internal memory. So we can see the internal right here. And so it always has a memory unit plugged in, even if you don't have an SD card, so it can fall back to the internal memory to run the visual part, even if you don't have internal memory. You'll notice I also don't have a controller plugged in. So let's plug in the controller, and we'll see that the controller will show up right there to saying, hey, I can understand this controller. This controller is compatible, and it's working. Another thing with this one is Rumble is not enabled by default. You need to hold select on the controller and hit down on the D-pad. And now the VMU has rumble markers around it to say the jump pad has been plugged in. And if I hold select and then use the L1 and R1, you can cycle between the VMU slots, and there are 10 internal VMU slots. So essentially you have 10 built-in memory card units you can use without an SD card at all. Of course, the downside of not using an SD card is you cannot transport your SD card, transport your saves from the adapter to other locations. But if you do have an SD card, you can plug it in right here. And now you have to unplug it and plug it back in to switch between internal memory to SD card. So I'm going to do that. The open menu screen will not show up on the left because open menu does not send visual updates only when it's loaded in. So, all right, so now we can see it switched to SD mode. That means it's using the SD memory instead of the internal memory. So I can actually, transfer this SD card with my save files to my computer and whatnot, or other devices. But you can also see instead of using VMU slots 1 to 10, it's using VMU slot GID, which is game ID. And game ID, of course, means it's going to make a save file for every different game I plugged in. So every game is going to have its own save file instead of having 10 banks. But if I want to use the 10 banks, I can hold select and cycle between them at will with the L1 and R1. Similar to that, or I could switch back to game ID mode. Okay. Let's launch into 240p test suite. We can see here that it detected, because we're using game ID, it detected that we launched 240p test suite, and it's creating a save file for 240p test suite specifically. Okay, and if we go to hardware tests, Maple device list, we can see we've got the controller here, the memory card above, and there's no jump pack, no rumble pack enabled, but I'm going to hold select and hit down on the D-pad, and now jump pack is there. And now let's disable it. There we go, and now it's disabled. If you go to controller test, the default controls are with select and X, and that's the default controller right there. If I do select and circle, it goes to PlayStation controls, which is basically just all buttons, all inputs enabled. If I go select and square, it goes to twin stick mode, which is basically, I think, for Unreal. I don't know. I forgot what game uses twin stick on the Dreamcast. If I do select and triangle, this is fight stick mode, which basically just enables a layout for fight sticks with the Z and C in their proper positions. If I do select and right on the D-pad, this is... Honestly, I don't know what controller that is for because it's not reading any of my inputs. I know what it is. Select and right is for custom controls, and I don't have a custom file dropped into the SD card, so it didn't know what to read. Select and left goes into racing mode if you have a racing controller. So yeah, that's pretty much the same as USB 4 Maple. But it's, like I said, it's a bit easier to use because you have this on-screen display telling you exactly what the device is reading when it's not. But as I said, it also has a smaller list of compatible controllers because it's a newer platform. But many people will choose to use this new platform because it is easier to use. Now, what else did I want to mention? Oh yes, updating the firmware. With the USB 4 Maple, to update the firmware, you had to open it up, unplug one cable, and then plug into that cable. This new version does not have a USB hub built in, so you don't have to do that. instead, if you want to update it, you just plug in right here, plug into a USB 2.0 port on your computer, and hold the boot cell button when you're plugging it in. And you don't need to open it up at all to update the firmware. Like I said, it's a whole lot easier to use, even if there is compatibility limitations. Now, what else did I want to mention? Oh, yes. Something that not specific to this controller in general, but specific to Dreamcast in general. And that would be modding your Dreamcast. Now, most people, the first thing they do when they mod their Dreamcast is they will replace the fuse on the controller ports. Now, the built-in fuse with the Dreamcast is 0.8 amps. But the fuse that tends to come with these kits is 0.4 amps, which is, not as lenient as the 0.8 amps that come with the stock console. If for most people, that's fine. You're going to have a controller plugged in, whatever. It's not a problem. But if you're playing a game that has 4 controllers and you want all 4 of those people to have Rumble enabled, then you're going to blow this fuse. 0.4 amps is not enough to, for instance, run 4 PlayStation 5 controllers with Rumble enabled. It's one of the reasons why the Pico2Maple, the guy who made it, has it so that Rumble is not enabled by default, because so many people will blow this fuse not knowing that's what's happening. And so if you get one of these kits that comes with the fuse, the LED, the capacitors, and a replaceable battery holder, chances are it's not going to have a fuse that's powerful enough to run that many controllers. It's definitely not powerful enough to run 2 of these devices with the large screen and PS5 controllers and Rumble enabled. If you have 2 of these plugged in, you're going to blow that fuse. So I recommend replacing this fuse with a fuse that is at least as powerful as the fuse that came with the console itself, which was 0.8 amps. Generally, the one that's easy to find is 0.9 amps. They're only about 30 cents each, so I will actually begin possibly including them in any kit for anyone who orders the USB to DC. Plus, I'll just include them for free because they're not expensive. Like I said, they're about 30 cents, and I've got a whole bunch left over, so I will just include them for people. But that's one of the another problem people have been having with the USB 4 Maple, because Rumble is enabled by default and they don't have powerful enough fuses. They'll plug them in and start blowing the fuse, and they don't even understand what's happening, forcing them to restart their console just to get things working again. But that's just something worth mentioning. It's something that is very easily fixed. Anyways, that's about it, and peace out.